Welcome back to Breaking Truth Network, where we expose the stories corporate media buries. Today, we turn to Cuba, where history was made at the United Nations General Assembly. And once again, the world stood against the United States embargo.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
We end today's show in Cuba. On Wednesday, the United Nations General Assembly voted to condemn the U.S. embargo on Cuba for the 33rd consecutive year, with 165 countries voting in favor of a non-binding resolution calling on the U.S. to lift the embargo, while 7 nations that the U.S. reportedly pressured voted against it, including Ukraine and Israel.
For the 33rd year in a row, America was isolated on the world stage. And this time, Trump's UN ambassador, Mike Waltz, tried to break with tradition, delivering a fiery speech urging nations to side with Washington.
Waltz was also Trump's national security advisor and infamously set up a Signal group chat earlier this year to discuss plans to bomb Yemen, and then accidentally invited Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg to join.
In a dramatic moment, Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez interrupted Waltz from the UN floor.
The permanent representative of the United States not only lies by substantially deviating from the topic, but also speaks in a rude and arrogant manner. Mr. Walsh, this is the United Nations General Assembly. This is not a signal chat, nor is it the House of Representatives.
And as that clash unfolded at the UN, Hurricane Melissa ripped through eastern Cuba after devastating Jamaica. Over 700,000 people were evacuated, and yet not a single Cuban life was lost.
Well, in Cuba, no one's dead. There is no casualties there is no human lives that we lost. That's because the labor and the work of the civil defense of Cuba, something that I'm pretty sure that the Professor Mikhail have a lot to say about that. But I'm just going to say that United Nations has been writing down that Cuba is one of example, is a role model when we talk about risk management disasters.
While the US often fails its own citizens during disasters, Cuba, under decades of crippling sanctions, shows how collective preparation saves lives.
In recent weeks, the deployment of pressure, intimidation, and toxicity by the U.S. Department of State has been brutal and unprecedented on a large scale, so as to force sovereign countries to change their vote on the resolution that we adopt today. They have deployed all their weapons, in particular coercion, but the truth, the law, reason, and justice are always more powerful and conclusive.
Despite being crushed by sanctions, Cuba mobilized faster and more effectively than many wealthy nations. But rebuilding remains an uphill battle.
We don't have enough money right now. Well, the government doesn't have enough money to put in health or in public education. So they have like another kind of priorities. Imagine the amount of money that we have to recover a country after a hurricane as Melissa just passed by. It's insane. So they are trying to dip Cuba in an economic crisis. They're trying to overthrow the Cuban government.
Cuba was handling these kinds of disasters really in an exemplary manner, as Liz pointed out. The United Nations, the Oxford International Development Organization, all independent experts on hurricane preparedness or disaster preparedness in general have praised Cuba. And this goes back many decades. I'm a historian, and this interested me. How did this come about? It came about very early on in the revolution. A huge hurricane named Flora in 1963. So this is just a year after the missile crisis, 2 years after the Bay of Pigs invasion, struck the same area of Cuba that Melissa just struck. It was a different kind of hurricane. It did a kind of a loop, double loop around, and it killed about 1,200 people, caused a huge amount of damage. And during that, Fidel Castro actually personally led rescue operations. And the lesson that the Castro and the revolutionary leadership learned is that you needed a much more comprehensive kind of response, and the civil defense is what came out of that a few years later. I've seen that Cuban dissidents and Cuban critics basically broadcast Cuban meteorologists based in Cuba uncritically, and this is something they never do for anything else.
The lesson is clear. While Washington uses sanctions as a weapon, Cuba turns scarcity into survival. Once again, the world is watching and voting to end the embargo.